You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 585, a time-honored tradition here on the Cantina Cast, and that is the final hype show. So this is the show that we give you before we get into the premiere of a movie, TV show, whatever the case may be. And if you aren't hyped already, hopefully this gives you just a little bit more to get you there. And this has got... we'll talk about all the nitty gritty stuff around like who's directing it, how many episodes, and et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll kind of end the show talking about predictions, some Razor Crest moments, and just things that we're looking forward to, general thoughts on the series as it's progressed over the last probably month in terms of the media coverage and all the TV spots. Should be a great show. Should be a lot of fun. And to help me do all that, of course, is Jonesy, who's with us every week. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Happy holidays, my friend. Good to see you.
Happy holidays to you too. I know we've been busy
now. Yeah, we can officially say it. Thanksgiving here in the U.S. has come and gone, and now we are firmly in the winter holidays. So the Christmas tree is already up and decorated. So we're in good shape here.
Yeah. So before we get started, and I know you've got some special folks that I know you want to say thank you to.
Yeah, thanks to all of our Patreon members. cantinacast.com/Patreon. If you were curious, we've been doing all of our New Hope look backs and kind of retrospective reviews, breakdowns, whatever you want to call it. It's been a lot of fun. But a special thanks to all of our now part of the tribe members: Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sarkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And of course, the Delusions Granular members. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. And if you're listening to this, thanks for the download. If you'd like to come out and visit us on the live stream, you could be really cool like these people: JJ Skywalker, My Star Wars Guys, Diego David. A lot of people in the background right now, so please do jump on the chat, say hello. We'd love to put your thoughts on the screen. Let us know what you're getting excited about with Skeleton Crew. Again, cantinacast.com/YouTube if you're listening and you'd like to join us in the future. But if you're there in the background, we see you. And there's Alex. Thanks, Alex, for saying something. So everybody else, come and say hi and let us know your thoughts as we go through the show. We'll try to put them up on screen.
Yeah. And if you got questions, throw them up there. If you've got predictions, throw them up there. Happy to entertain that stuff as time permits. Again, we've got our own stuff that we'll cover here in a little bit, but this show, before we came on air, it's been a little interesting, very different than we've had in previous shows in terms of what's been released. And that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel like a lot of the material that has been shown is recycled material. It's a lot of the same scenes. It's a lot of the same stuff that we already know. I think that bodes well for it's very clear. There aren't very many leaks out there, which by this time, The Acolyte had so many things leaked and so many other TV series and movies as well. But this one seems like it's been held under a very, very tight net. So that really kind of makes your mind go a lot of different ways. I mean, we can get into really crazy, wild speculations because at this point, I don't know that anything's really off limits because we just don't know more than what the premise of the show is and what they've given us through the TV spots, like I said earlier.
Yeah, it's actually been very strange. It was the lead up to this. I was actually talking with a friend about this too, my buddy Hardcounter, and that we're getting it hit really hard now, like a week, maybe 2 weeks, but really just this last week, they've been hitting it really consistently, right? If you watch TV during the sports games, during any of the movies, I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark the other day, it was on TV, and sure enough, Skeleton Crew ads kept coming up, hitting it really hard. But like you said, really the marketing part of this, like the more interesting aspect have been the interviews that they've done, and like some of the teasers and the TV spots haven't done a lot to really energize me about it, but watching some of the interviews actually this time around got me a little more excited, just kind of hearing people's enthusiasm for what they were doing. The interviews with the creators, with David Lowery and with John Watts, Christopher Ford, and Bryce Dallas Howard. I mean, all these amazing people, including some of the actors like Jude Law and the kids, of course. So those things have done, I think, a little bit as well. But you're right. This has been a bit of a weird one. It's been really truncated, really short. And then it's not really been a whole lot of new stuff. There's been little sprinkles of it here and there, but nothing that really that gives you any more than what we already have known for the last 2 months, really, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it is nice to see all the new footage and kind of put some of the pieces together, but it's really been more stitching the teaser stuff together, stitching the trailers and the TV spots all of that makes sense. But, similar to, again, other TV shows as well, most of what we're seeing does feel like it's in the very early episodes, which is, probably expected. They're not gonna blow anything away with, the last, final episode or a big reveal, of course, in these teasers and stuff. But it is just it is odd, the timing of this and just how much we've gotten so far. We're going to get into all that here in just a second.
Yeah,
but
just real quick, while we're kind of doing initial thoughts here, take a step back. If you're not a Star Wars enthusiast and you're seeing this, maybe you have a family or something like that, is this piquing your interest in any kind of way, or is it maybe the nostalgia side of it might be doing that? Or is any of that really kind of happening for you if you were to take a step back from a Star Wars enthusiast side?
Yeah, I think it has. I don't know how much though. That's been really hard to gauge because on one hand, even though they're hitting the nostalgia vibe and the nerve and the aesthetic, even with their marketing materials, I mean, the last few days, Disney's
really hard with that side.
Yeah, Star Wars has been releasing a lot of fan posters. They did this with the Acolyte, I believe, when that show came out, and I think that might have been the first series that they did this, where they were showcasing a lot of fan art, right, prior to. But they've done a lot of that here, and a lot of it has had a lot of that 80s aesthetic. And so from that perspective, I think that's a hook. It's a nice way. It's a nice shiny thing to kind of get people to notice and take note of. But I think a lot of people are still looking at this going, okay, it's a kid shows. It's the whole Amblin thing all over again, right? Where you've got kids and people immediately assume, okay, this is a kid's show. I think what we'll probably find out maybe 1 or 2 episodes in, I think as more people talk about that, it may start to generate a lot of buzz and kind of organically grow its audience. But I think a lot of people are just kind of interest piqued, but not necessarily going, man, this is like, the Kenobi show or the Kenobi series, we've got Vader and Kenobi clashing at some point down the road. I mean, that was a major hook, even for the casual fans, because you've got, Jedi versus Sith and lightsabers. This one does feel a little bit different. So I think to answer your question is like, I don't know that it's really pulling in a whole lot of new audience members. I think they really are banking on the quality of the show, the writing of the show, and just that organic water cooler talk to kind of help this grow, similar to what we saw maybe with like Andor and some of the other series that didn't really pull people in almost immediately. But what are you hearing? I guess I know you've got some, people out there that you keep in touch with that aren't necessarily huge Star Wars fans, or not in the weeds, or not listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube show on Friday night, December, whatever day we're on here. But what are you hearing as well?
Well, I think there's a little bit of interest. I think some people are like, wow, this seems really different from Star Wars. Like, where are the lightsabers? Where's that kind of stuff? Which I think is also getting them a little bit in, like, there's some people who are like, oh, if none of that's there, I'm not interested. But there's others who are like, well, maybe during the holidays we'll be able to watch this, maybe like over Christmas or something. We'll let a few, and then we'll binge watch over the holidays when people have some time off and things like that. And maybe more family oriented type of show. Adventure, I think, is the thing that is probably the theme I keep coming across. And I think we'll probably see some of this. I think Robin, or my Star Wars guys out there in the chat, was saying he's kind of done a 180 on this from the first time we heard about it. Now he's actually getting excited. And I think it's that sense of wonderment, that sense of adventure, I think, is what might pull people in. I think you're right on the money, though. And you said exactly what I was thinking as well. I think this isn't going to be a show that's going to hit the numbers right away. And when we talk about the budget and things like that here in a minute, we can talk more about this. But I think this is going to be a show that if it's really solid, these first 2 episodes and maybe that 3rd episode, I'm with you. I think this is something that will build and grow an audience and kind of be like an old school way, like how they used to do this in the 70s and 80s with the movies, right? Where you just have it in the theaters for a long time, and slowly over time you'd expand it and your audience would get bigger and bigger, and then you get excited. So I think if it delivers on these first few and really hooks people in, like it kind of seems like it has the opportunity to do, then I think, yeah, those numbers will come along. So I think we have to be really careful to not judge the show prematurely in those first 2-3 weeks, and to let this thing and see where this is going for us before we kind of get too worked up in how well the show is doing, and just kind of look and see what is it doing well, rather than is the show doing well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And I think for as far as expectations, and again, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but the people that I've spoken to that aren't necessarily, again, hardcore fans, they're coming in with the show with very low expectations.
Yeah.
They're kind of just like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it has the potential, which we'll get into here more, to really become something special on its own, regardless of whether or not it ties into the Filoni-verse, or whether or not it ties into, Star Wars Rebels or anything upcoming, Thrawn, all that stuff. I mean, the potential is there for all that to happen, and it would be kind of cool to weave that in. But I think, but on its own, it's got a potential just to kind of be something special, very and different, just based on the premise alone and the perspective that we're getting through the kids. Never been done before on screen for Star Wars. So all great stuff there. Just quickly in the chat, you referred to this. My Star Wars guy says, I've done a complete 180 on the show from its first reveal. I was not very interested, at first, but now I'm actually excited for it to get here. I'd like to, and maybe Rob, if you get some time, throw that in the comments there. I'd love to understand, like, what was it that really kind of sparked your interest? Was it just the over saturation of the media that tends to bring people over, or was there something that really kind of, was it the behind the scenes stuff with the directors? Was it the kid interviews? Was it, what was it that really kind of made you take a turn there? Alex chimed in and said, if this wasn't Star Wars, I would still watch. Just as a sci-fi fan, I really enjoy the 80s kid on bikes genre as a kid of the 80s. So that makes absolute sense. And then Diego David, hey, says, being different from Star Wars, does it mean it's not Star Wars? Many people on Instagram say it can't be because it deviates too much. What do you think? I'd watch it anyways. I actually had this as something to talk about a little bit later. I want to just kind of, let's touch on it now. I think, if Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau weren't behind this, I think I can see where the concern is, right? But we always have to remember they do. And there was I think it was Chris Ford or somebody was saying that, because those two guys are behind this, they put the bumpers on stuff, right? They make sure that everything stays within the context of Star Wars as we know it today. It doesn't deviate too far. And so, yeah, on the surface, I totally get it. Like we're going to talk about the planet here, the city at Atlan, and what that potentially could be. There are some kind of what I would call red flags, using air quotes there. But at the same time, I think that is all intentional, right? Yeah. And I think that because you've got those two guys behind it and you've got these very creative people that are kind of telling the narrative through the kids' perspective, yes, at times it can feel like it's not Star Wars. And I've seen the feedback. I've seen people say, look, this isn't even looks like Star Wars. I would say this, a lot of those are the same people that have hated everything that it's come out since 2015, first and foremost. But I think the people that are kind of more level-headed are looking at this going, yeah, this does look weird. But at the same time, I think that's part of that interest and that intrigue, right? It is very different, similar to what we felt when Andor was coming out. It does feel very different because it breaks the mold. It breaks a lot of the norm that's been established, especially over the last few years where we've been heavily saturated during the reign of the Galactic Empire, right? We're really kind of breaking away from a lot of that mainstream Star Wars media, whether it was comics or TV shows or movies, whatever the case may be. We're getting away from all of that. So I don't know. I think there's it can swing both ways, but it doesn't. I think it's absolutely going to be steeped in Star Wars and feel like Star Wars, even though aesthetically there's some things in here that we're seeing that don't necessarily resonate with us immediately as Star Wars fans. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get kind of into this part of it. I think the home planet is really meant to, as they've said this a few times now, it's meant to really make you feel like this is a safe place, right? This is home. This is my neighborhood. This is a place that I feel comfortable in, that really nothing really goes wrong in my bubble, right? Everything is okay, right? And I think that's the idea that they're trying to do. But there's something amiss, and we talked about this in our other breakdowns. They kind of hint at this, maybe this school or whatever they're doing, right? This test that they're all taking that'll define their future. Like, what does that actually mean? What are they doing here? And is there something kind of nefarious going on in the background? I was a little hesitant to go too far down that path at the start, but now it just seems more and more likely, right? They at least lean into some of this on the imagery. We'll see if they actually deliver on that. But so it's very intentional that you get this very safe neighborhood-like environment. So it's like any other suburban neighborhood in America, in particular, right? And it's just supposed to give you that level of comfort. And I think that's, like they said, that's very intentional. So when you step outside of that, then you're kind of looking at it from these kids' point of view of like, wow, everything is big and scary, and I don't really know I can't make heads or tails of any of it. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it, but I don't know who to trust. I trust the wrong people. Those types of things happen. So it's supposed to give you this level of discomfort in the follow the kids. So I think from that respect, it's probably going to work just fine. So we'll see if they deliver on maybe this underlying narrative that the parents are dealing with as they try to find the kids, to see if there's something else going on behind the scenes there too that will be interesting to us. I think the other thing is, how well does this all fit in with Mandoverse, if really at all, except for a couple of characters. So that's another curiosity I have, of that will help it make it feel like Star Wars, to see if it actually connects in any direct way, or if it's just a Yeah, it's set in the same time frame, but there's no real relation from some of this stuff. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. It's been a while. Let's do this. Let's get into the origin stuff. I want to get into the tail of the tape, get into some numbers, that kind of thing, and then we'll get into more discussion around predictions and some of the stuff that we picked up on that maybe perked our ears, or opened our eyes when we were watching all the press junket stuff that's happened here recently. So, for anybody that doesn't know, this was first rumored back in 2022 under the code name of Grammar Rodeo, which is a callback to the Simpsons episode. If you remember that was a big thing. Everybody was trying to predict what the heck is this thing about. Officially announced during Star Wars Celebration that same year. I think it was Kathleen Kennedy who came out and said, John Watts came to me, very much wanted to do some sort of Goonies and Star Wars. And by that, I mean, that was enough to get everybody super excited. And I think Alex just kind of chimed in as well. The name is great too. Super Goonies, like feeling Skeleton Crew, right? That really got a lot of people talking, even though we really didn't know a whole lot about it at the time. Filming started in September of 2022, went through January of 2023. So not too long of a film shoot. And then we've spent the better part of, there was this, the writer's strike in there as well. It went into post-production there. And then I think I threw this in here, but it was funny because you remember earlier this year, I think it was in July, they had the Lego set that was leaked as the Onyx Cinder. I think it was a German toy company or something had published that. And that had the ship on there. We had names at that point, and it was like, it was only a matter of time before they started releasing more and more details about it from there on. But just funny how all that kind of happened. It was that we got one of our major leaks coming from a toy vendor.
It's always Lego, man. It's always Lego.
It is. If it's not Lego, then it's the soundtrack.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. That was only one time. That's the synopsis. Skeleton Crew tells a story of 4 kids searching for their home planet after getting lost in the Star Wars galaxy and strange aliens and dangerous places they encounter on their adventure. I mean, that pretty much is what we've heard. There's been a couple of different variations. We've covered the different variations. Whether it was, we had the first breakdown of the was it Celebration exclusive trailer. We did that. Oh my gosh, it was a long time ago. What was the date on that? Do you remember when that was?
I want to say it was like May of last year. It was whatever Celebration was.
Yeah,
right?
it was May 16th, 2023. So we did a breakdown of that trailer, and there's actually some footage in there that has not been shown in any of the the TV spots. Now, it's not major footage, nothing big reveal or anything, but there is some stuff that was shown in that. So if you're a Patreon member, go back to I think it's May 16th. We've got it tagged under our Patreon catalog, which you can hear the whole breakdown on that. But, for the most part, there's been, again, not a whole lot since then. And it was just slowly kind of coming out until finally we just, again, the valve opened up here about 2 weeks ago. But the synopsis, been through different variations. I don't know if there's really been anything,
There's only one little phrase, and we kind of already touched on this, is like seemingly safe, place in the galaxy when they're talking about their home planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that I think we keep leaning into, that there's something extra there. That why would they phrase it in that way if there wasn't some underlying, thing happening with this potential school or whatever it is that they keep getting called down to in some of the trailers.
All right, well, hold that thought because I've got some theories on what that is here a little bit later. Of course, the series is set to premiere on December 2nd, 2 episodes. And I think the day that we were supposed to do the show, just a couple of days ago, they announced that they were moving that up. And now there's actually a movie premiere a theater premiere as well. So I don't know first off, Canada is getting this thing on the 30th, which is tomorrow. So I don't know why they got to have this thing on the 30th. The embargo doesn't officially lift until the 2nd. But that the Canadian film venues, they're touting it as like a family night. So I would imagine this weekend we're going to see, and whether you like it or not, there's going to be all kinds of spoilers, which I'm really concerned about, honestly, because the embargo only really applies to people like us, people that get media access, that kind of thing. We trying to hold that to the embargo so that we can continue to get that stuff. But I don't know that you're going to be able to keep the Canadian family force from going online and just putting stuff out there. So that could be a concern. I'd say be very careful starting tomorrow night, especially on Sunday, so that you try to avoid any spoilers that may be coming out.
Yeah, and it does sound like there have been some press screenings already. So some people have seen it. We've not seen any of it yet, but there have been a few pockets of people that have seen this already. So, But again, they tend to be very cautious about all of that. So I haven't seen really many spoilers yet.
Yeah, no. And for the American audiences, so Monday night, they'll be showing both episodes at theaters, select theaters. I think there's a total of 25 theaters all over the U.S. Austin was able to get one. And it was actually Pflugerville, which is a small town that's surrounded by Austin. So it's essentially Austin. I mean, come on, let's be real.
Yeah, we had one out here in the southeast side of Houston, but with rush hour and everything, that's like a 2-hour trek for me. So
yeah.
You're going though, right?
I am going. I'll be out there Monday night. I plan on getting there early because it is a first come, first serve, which means you get a ticket, right? Your name goes on the list, but you're not guaranteed anything unless you're in line ahead of time. And they did the same thing with the Acolyte. Right. Showed up there about 5 o'clock, about 2 hours prior to, and I was like the first person in line. So I suspect that this one may be a little bit more. Well, I don't know. I don't know how crazy popular this one's going to be, but either way, I'll be there.
Well, we'll say that, but both your theater and the one out here still had tickets as recently as yesterday when we were looking at this stuff. So the rest were sold out. So ours may not be very popular at theaters, I guess.
Huh, we'll see. I know the David from Star Wars stuff. He's going to be driving up here from San Antonio.
Nice.
So I'll meet up with him on Monday night as well. So I'm really only going to get the Skeleton Crew poster that they're handing out that looks pretty slick.
That's usually what you do.
Yeah. All right. So as far as the number of episodes, speaking of episodes, we've got 8 episodes in total. I'm hearing that they're about 35 minutes long ish, which, I know we've talked about that so many times with so many different television series now. I don't know that it really makes a difference, but yeah, it seems like it's par for the course at this point. Yeah. That first episode, of course, December 2nd, it's going to take us all the way through January 14th. Let's talk really quickly about the directors. You've got John Watts is directing the first one. David Lowery has got episodes 2 and 3. Daniel Kwan, Daniel Scheinert have episode 4. Jake Schreier's episode 5. Bryce Dallas Howard is episode 6. Lee Isaac Chung, who's no stranger to Star Wars directing, is picking up the 7th episode. And then we come back to John Watts, who started it all in the last episode. And for the most part, all of these episodes are written by Christopher Ford, John Watts. I want your thoughts, with the exception of 2. Myung-Jo Windsor has got episodes 5 and 6. But I guess when you're looking at the director list and you're looking at the writers being primarily Chris Ford, John Watts, given what they've done in the past, what do you think that says about the TV series?
Well, I think one thing that's positive is that there's consistency with the story, right? I think this is something that we're always a little bit concerned about when you have a showrunner. Do they actually do it from the very start all the way to the end? So it's interesting that there's 2 episodes in the middle that are somebody else. I'm not really sure what to make of that yet because I'm not as familiar, but I think when you look at the directors, though, this has been done fairly well so far. I think there's been pockets where the episodes feel a little disjointed. You can get a little bit of that. But what I like about some of this stuff is that you do get a different feel for the episode, especially if that's intentional, or you want to drive a more maybe serious tone or a slightly more cinematic view for a very specific purpose. And you bring in people who know that. But I mean, David Lowery knows his stuff. The Daniels know their stuff. We know Bryce Dallas Howard. I mean, these are names that are known and well respected in the industry and in kind of in this genre as well. So I think we're in pretty good hands here. I don't really have any major concerns. And I'm happy that Chris Ford and John Watts this is kind of their baby, though. I think, and that's what Kathleen Kennedy was saying early on. And I think has been very clear is that they have been present this entire process. You have Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau also kind of help shepherding it the entire way. So it does seem to have a lot of cohesion to it. And I think it's going to, this would probably feel like one of the more complete series that we've had in a while is kind of my impression so far.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, it is nice to have the consistency behind the writing. I'm also perplexed as why those 2 episodes in particular were handed off to someone else. Maybe they just had a better pitch or, they wanted to bring someone else in. Generally speaking, and again, I'm not making a prediction here, but sometimes when we see that shift, it's because those 2 episodes have some kind of significance, right? There's like that we go into another phase of the hero's journey at some point there, and it's handed off for someone else to kind of take that piece and just carry it. And then we come back. And so it's not atypical for us to see something like that.
And they're right in the middle, like episodes 5 and 6. So
that's right.
Just gives you more credibility on that one.
Right. Exactly. And we've seen it. There's a lot of consistency with that in past TV series from Star Wars and other as well. It's not exclusive to Star Wars by any means. So I like the fact that we've got consistent writing through all of this. the directors, I think they all kind of bring very unique perspectives, unique styles, things that they've done in the past. But when you look at the body of work that all of these guys have had, they've all told a story in some regard of the imagination, the adventure of it all through the kids' perspective, or young people's perspective of sorts. They all have that experience, and they've all got that in their back pocket. I think what really, though, has really impressed me about all of this is some of the behind the scenes stuff that we got. That roundtable, especially, that was really comforting to hear, because you got the sense that every one of these people came. I think it was Ford who said that the Amblin effect, or the Amblin feel, is just in their DNA. Like, they weren't consciously out there trying to write, hey, let's do E.T. Hey, let's do Flight of the Navigator. Hey, let's do Explorers. Let's do Goonies. They weren't actively trying to do that, but because they were raised on that, it is part of their DNA, and it's a story that they wanted to tell within this universe of Star Wars. And so from that perspective, I think that has been the most comforting thing, is to hear them talk about the series, because there's so much passion and there's so much sincerity in what they were setting out to do, how they approached the project, that I think that's going to bode well. I think that's going to translate into what we see and what we hear on screen, and having that backdrop, that campaign of Star Wars, is just kind of a huge added bonus for us, of course. So I like it. I'm really excited about the creative people behind this and what they're able to kind of deliver. And I think that, again, speaking to what I mentioned earlier about, hey, this series has the potential to get really popular and become really good really fast, I think a lot of that is coming from what we just talked about here.
Yeah, and the directors were integrated with each other. They were seeking each other out, and they were present for the others. They were in the room together. So those types of things help us with this cohesive type of transition between episodes too, so they don't feel as abrupt, and they can pull ideas and share, and then put their unique spin on this stuff too. But it I think is more of a collaborative effort, at least what they were talking about in the roundtable, that I think we've seen in other projects, which is, I think, really encouraging.
Yeah. The as far as the budget goes, so kind of get into the numbers, we had broke this. I think we talked about it back during the Acolyte, because you remember, I think the Acolyte was originally supposed to come out after Skeleton Crew, right? At least is the release order, and they kind of flipped it on us sometime last year. But it was back then that we got word that this was about $136 million for 10 episodes. So that breaks out to about $13.6 million per episode.
Thought there were only 8 episodes.
Oh, 8 episodes. Sorry. Yeah, 8 episodes. My math is wrong.
So it's about 17 million per episode.
Thank you.
Yeah.
17 million total. If you look at that compared to Andor, which was like 250 million, but 22 million per episode, it's just under that. It's still not as much as the Acolyte, of course. And that was, we won't get into a whole discussion there about why, the impact of that on the series. But yeah, I mean, it seems like it's lower budget than Andor, but at the same time, there is something about what we've seen so far on screen that's kind of looks more high budget. It looks more like a movie. There seems to be a lot more use of practical effects. I know the volume is being used in this. They've said that in a couple of different places here and there. I think you and I probably agree that they've gotten to a point now where they've gotten good about when to use the volume and when not to. Whether that decision is the right decision, I don't know, but it feels like they at least know when they should and shouldn't use it.
It has its place, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it does look like it's going to be a high quality production, I guess is what I'm saying. Nothing really stands out. Like even the practical effects. I just want to go back to that real quick. All the monsters, there's a ton of creatures that we've seen so far. And I feel like we're going to have even more surface based on what some of the creators have talked about. But all in all, it does feel like it's, what you would expect from a high class, I wouldn't say, it's not the right word, a high production value series coming from Star Wars.
Yeah, we have a certain expectation when it comes to Star Wars, Marvel, I think even DC. I mean, these bigger budget projects, right? You expect them to bring their A game, whether it's on the big screen or whether it's on Disney Plus, right? So we all have this expectation. So you have to be able to deliver that. $136 million is still a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, clearly much less than what Andor and what Acolyte and some others have cost, but it's still a lot of money. So it'll be interesting to see how well this does over time. And then this thing hopefully has some legs here to where it's not just 8 episodes and it drops off the face of the earth. I'm hoping this is something that people continue to come back to, and it's got that staying power, kind of like a summer family movie, right? That kind of warms up and it just kind of finds a foothold, and then it just keeps going and going and going. Mm-hmm. So it's never a massive hit, maybe, but it's something that it kind of it finds its niche and it just has life and it just keeps going. So I think this is maybe where this fits in. I think that's the appeal in some ways past the initial maybe wave that doesn't get to see it, but it'd be interesting. 17 million in this episode is still pretty high, but again, remember back in the day when $100 million for a movie was considered like astronomical and crazy.
Like, wow, you're never going to make that back.
Right. I mean, some of the original stars were like 200 and 300 million. And we're like, whoa, my gosh, that's just insane. And now we're doing this for TV shows, right? So,
yeah. It's inflation, man. All right, let's get into the cast and crew here. So we've talked about all the directors already. Music is by Mick, and I always forget, is it Giacchino?
Giacchino, yeah.
Giacchino, all right. I used to say Giacchino, and that's not right. So Giacchino, who's the son of the
Michael,
right? And so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here, but music is important. We just did the John Williams, music by John Williams. We did a breakdown of that for Patreon members and really kind of just gushed and cried over the air about how much John Williams' music has meant to us.
Quite literally in some
Quite
ways,
literally
yes.
at times.
Yep.
But it is so important, right? It is the breath of Star Wars in a lot of ways. And the only thing I've read is that he has gone in and created a lot of orchestra pieces. When I hear that, the only thing that comes to mind is I get a sense that we're going to have kind of that E.T. I mean, I don't want to say it's a full orchestra, but a lot of what we were feeling in E.T., I imagine we're going to hear a lot of. I don't expect to hear a lot of synths. I feel like it's going to be very traditional in that sense, right? Like a John Williams type kind of composer. But at the same time, too, I don't know that we're going to get these epic kind of themes either. And I don't know enough about Mick. I think this might be one of his first gigs, honestly. This is probably his biggest gig at this point. I haven't really looked too much into what he's done so far, but it does feel like it's going to be very simple. And I think that's probably okay. I think it'll be comforting. It'll feel, second nature to us to see what we're seeing on screen with that type of music, that orchestra and the stuff around that inspiration from John Williams. But I don't know that we're necessarily going to get these big sweeping, like iconic themes or, songs that we've gotten from John Williams or any of the other ones. Ludwig, his work has just been kind of iconic at this point and almost legendary now. But any thoughts around the music and what we potentially could be getting here?
It's always interesting, right? Because it's not John Williams. And so even Michael Giacchino, even though as popular as the Rogue One soundtrack was, there were some people that was like, oh, it's a little bit strange here and there. And then you bring in the themes and it kind of feels good again. So it's an adjustment, right, for us. I think the interesting thing is with the teasers and the spot trailers and things like that is that they continue to use the Star Wars kind of typical themes. But like you said, they kind of feel like they're in more of these sweeping or orchestral type of arrangements, which are much more akin to how John Williams scored E.T. and other scores in that kind of genre, right? So I think this is something that's interesting, that Steven Spielberg range. So I think it's something interesting to see. Does it truly go down that path, or is that really just what we're hearing for the trailers? You can never trust that that's any music in the show, of course, or that's even the composer, because they usually have somebody else doing all of that just to get it knocked out. So it'll be interesting. But I think anytime we bring in a new composer in, there's always a little bit of that trepidation of what are we going to get? Is it going to feel right? Is it going to match? And I think, we have enough experience. And Lucasfilm does this really pretty well. I think they usually match music pretty well for the scenes and what they need to do it with. Very rarely do I think they actually miss the boat, right, on what would have applied in a certain scene. We probably got some examples here and there, but more often than not, that process usually works pretty well to where they find the right mix to find that right tone. It may not be super memorable, but I think it works for the scenes that we have. So this is something that I'm going into with an open mind, and we'll see. Anytime you bring an unknown kind of composer for us, even though he has the lineage, it's something we always get a little bit nervous about. But we'll see how well this one works out. Yeah,
I know the answer to this question from you because I know you well enough, but I'm going to ask it anyways because I've seen it come up as far as conversation here recently, and that was whether or not this music has to lean into the John Williams score. Do we have to hear any of the iconic Star Wars themes at any point? Let me just leave it there.
That's a hard one. There's a part of me that says yes to help it feel like Star Wars and remind you that it's Star Wars, which I think is what they're doing with the trailers. Because if you just heard this on in the background, you probably wouldn't know it was Star Wars until you start hearing, well, that music sounds familiar.
Right.
So I think there's going to be some themes like that, but I think at the same time, it's going to be 100% original and whatever Meg Giacchino feels is necessary for the scenes. I think it will still fit within what we're used to, and I think fit within a George Lucas slash Steven Spielberg type of production, if you will. So
Hmm.
I think it'll still probably fit in that same vein. Is it going to feel exactly like Star Wars? Probably not, but that might be all right too. But I think they will need to lean into some of the themes, at least lightly, and variations, just to remind you and keep you kind of grounded of where you're at. But I think back when we're on like the home planet, probably not. I think we're going to get something completely original, and there might not even be any subtle cues of it until we get out into the galaxy, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's probably a good combination there. Um, I don't expect it to be kind of like Kevin Kiner, where he weaves tons of stuff in from John Williams, because that's what he's always done, right? And ever since he started,
Well,
whether it
with
was Clone
Rebels,
Wars and Rebels, right?
yeah, it just made sense, right? Because
Exactly,
it
exactly.
was Star Wars.
It
in the way
was
that we
Star
do it.
Wars. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be, Andor did a really good job of kind of creating an atmosphere with its music, even though it didn't seem like Star Wars. It didn't sound like John Williams. There was a lot of synth that was used, a lot of ominous sounds at times.
Yeah.
That helped to kind of create that mood, set the tone, set the theme for it. I suspect that, Mick could probably do something very similar like that. But you're right. I think it's going to be used lighter. There'll be lighter moments in there where we'll get to hear those themes to kind of bring us back or make us think of something. Even though it's not necessarily what's happening on screen, it's going to take us back to a moment during some part of the George Lucas or John Williams orchestras that just kind of bring us to that same place. So it'll probably be light, but I don't think it's necessary. And I think that was the question: is it absolutely necessary? No, but I do think that he will do it. So
I think the type of themes that we'll get, or the type of the feelings that we'll get from this, will remind us of like early '80s John Williams in a way.
yeah,
Like the Indiana Jones score, some of the ET, like that kind of lighthearted, fun, like energetic type of thing. I think we
the
might
whimsical stuff that he uses a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I think some of that, a lot of winds and brass and things like that, I think will probably, that's my guess as to what we would get, just based on kind of the feel that we're getting for the show so far.
Yep.
But that might be completely wrong, but that's just kind of my guess right now, is that we'll get something kind of early '80s, mid '80s inspired John Williams.
All right, as far as the actors go, I think we've probably already seen and heard so much from these actors now, but you've got Jude Law playing Jod Nawood. We'll talk about him more here in just a second. Ravi Kabat Conyers. And I'm sorry, man. This guy just followed me on Instagram, and thank you so much. That's very humbling, honestly, but hopefully you don't disfollow me or unfollow me because I just screwed up your name. But he's playing Wim, our main character, at least as I can gather here. Ryan Armstrong is playing Fern. We've got Kiriana Crotter as KB, and then Robert Timothy Smith as Neil. These kids are just incredible, and I know it's there's already people talking about they're kid actors, and some people are kind of giving them flack, but these guys. I don't know. There's something different about them. There's something about their chemistry, the way they're doing their interviews now, the way they talk about Star Wars, that feels very similar to many of those childhood actors that we're referencing about, whether it's Goonies or E.T., that had that same kind of light, that same kind of hope in their eyes, and just kind of, they seem very grounded and very mature for their age and what they've come to appreciate and understand from Star Wars. And I think that bodes well. And again, another factor that I think is going to translate on screen for that. And we've already seen too, like even in some of the trailers and some of the footage, they released a couple of clips now, short clips, 60 seconds and less. I think there's been 2, but it looks like good stuff. It reminds me a lot of the 80s movies that we've already referenced so many times now.
Yeah, they do have a nice chemistry, and I think again that we have a pairing kind of going on with Wim and Neil, and then Firm and KB.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, they were all about 12 and 13 years old, I think, when they were filming the show, and they're just a little bit older than that now. So they're all kind of early teenagers for the most part. So you start to feel a bit of that maturity kind of coming through in these interviews, which is nice, but also you still get that youthful enthusiasm too. And I think what was really cool was them connecting with their parents as well over some of these moments, and like going and revisiting the catalog. Oh, I need to show you this. They all flipped out over a Jawa, seeing it in person, the real time.
Right, yeah,
Jude Law might have. Yeah, so it's just funny, the iconography of all of this stuff back from 1977 that was originally rooted there, kind of being reintroduced to another generation in a different way, through a different light, and also a way of reconnecting with families. And I think that's something that I'm hoping the show will continue to do. And again, I think these 4 in particular, and then Jude Law kind of steering the ship in some ways, so to speak, I think has an opportunity to really do something like that here. And their spirit in this was really infectious, and something I think, and this is probably what Rob was talking about earlier in the show, was, seeing some of these interviews really start to get you excited because they're just friendly, likable people, right? And they pour their heart and soul in this, and their excitement is going to be palpable throughout the show. And I think what we've seen on screen so far is is kind of cool, and it seems to be working at the very least. So we'll see if it all kind of comes together in the right package. But I'm with you. I think their ability to play off one another seems to be like they really did a great job of casting this so far.
Yeah, I have a problem with Jude Law, and here's my problem. It's not what you're thinking.
He's just too good looking. What?
No, the problem I have with Jude Law is I always see Jude Law movies, and I'm like, he doesn't really interest me that much. I don't really like him as I don't even say that. He doesn't interest me enough to watch any of his movies. And then I watch his movie, and I'm like, holy crap, he was really good in that.
Yeah, he's really
And then the next movie comes out, and I'm like, it's Jude Law. Not really interested in it. And then I watch it, and I can't break the cycle. And I will say this, when this series was announced, I was like, Jude Law, all right. Now that I've seen him in trailers, I'm like, holy crap, he's got like, this guy's perfect. Everything about his expressions, the subtleties of his acting translate so well into at least what we know and think about his character right now. It is like a perfect casting. And to have him kind of be that cementing, grounding figure with the series, with the kids, and even the chemistry that we're seeing, the way they're bouncing off each other, there's something special about that. And so apologies to Jude Law. I'm going to stop doing this. I'll start watching your movies and getting excited because I've learned my lesson now. He's been in so many movies now that I felt like are really good, and he stands out as an actor. And every time it comes up, I'm just kind of like, it's Jude Law. But I promise this will stop. I'm excited that Jude Law is one of the main characters in this series.
He has so much range. It's really difficult.
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And you see him in a rom-com, and then you kind of see him in like a Western type. I mean, you see him like all these different types of movies, right? That they're just, you don't expect to see him, and you're like, well, how's he going to fit? And then when you watch it, like, he's actually really good in this. Like,
yeah.
He's just so unassuming, right? But he's such a powerful actor in these moments. He really kind of gets the characters and connects with them in ways you would not expect. So I think I'm probably in a similar boat as you. I wouldn't say underwhelmed, but it was just someone that I've not followed really closely for his career. I knew he's very well respected, and clearly is a very popular actor. And but it was just something I was like, how well does that fit in Star Wars? And now that we're seeing it, it seems like he's going to fit just fine. So we'll see how this plays out. But yeah, he seems to be a really good fit here that can kind of play this this kind of scoundrel type of character, right? One that goes from maybe caring to withdrawing and being self-centered, and then being a bit selfish, but still maybe, wanting to do what's right, heart of gold type of thing, which is something we always love, a little played out, but, something you always love in these harder, rough around the edge type of characters. So who better to play that, I think, than Jude Law, who can kind of capture all of that within a character and then steer it in a direction to hopefully come to something satisfying at the end.
Yeah. I mean, if you've never seen AI, he plays a similar role to some extent, right? He's the older character that takes a child on this, incredible journey to find his parents. But in that same vein, he does an amazing job. And I think he's playing like a, prostitute android that just happens to be the one that takes the kid on the journey. But very similar concept, at least a high level. But he does an amazing job in that role. So, all right. We're getting short on time here. I won't go through the rest of the list. Anybody else that stood out for you as far as like the actors? I know we've talked about Jaleel White as Gunter, and there's some other people in here. I know they did a thing on Nick Frost as SM-33. I thought that was great to see. I love the fact that he's going to be this, decrepit first mate droid that befriends the kids. And I know they've spoiled how he befriends the kids, which I think was kind of cool because it definitely puts Fern in a very power position. The way she kind of takes over. But anybody else stand out to you that you're looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, that was a great TV spot of how she becomes the captain of the ship type of thing.
Right.
And yeah, it's really. I think we've talked about some of them in the past. I'm curious about the parents. I want to see how well that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
We had talked about in one of our earlier breakdowns that we were concerned, or at least maybe I was concerned, that this might bring the show down. It might weight it down. It might pull back some of that energy and some of that forward momentum if we go back too often. And I think I'm starting to warm a little bit more to it, and maybe this is where you were at already, of like, okay, if there is some other story here, as long as it's compelling enough to keep bringing us back, I'll be okay with that. And it seems like they're trying to lean a little bit more into maybe this nefarious type of thing going on behind the scenes. But so I'm a little bit concerned there, but we've got two like amazing actors that I think are going to do a really great job at this too, with Kerry Condon and Tunde Abempe. Adebempe. Sorry about that. He's playing Wendell Wim's dad, but yeah. So I think these are two actors that are well respected too, and so I think this is something that we might be able to. I don't know. It might be one of those kind of dark horse parts of the story that are really good that you want more of, that you didn't expect getting more of. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's been my concern for a while. But we'll see if that if it kind of comes about, or if it is unwarranted.
Yeah. I noticed you didn't mention Teak, who is a Teak from the Battle of Endor. But that's fine, Jonesy. I get it.
I'm still having nightmares from how bad that puppet was in Caravan of Courage. So yes,
they
do have a lot of. So I think interesting here along those lines, right? So we know we're going to get Teak, who is in Caravan of Courage back from the '80s TV show, right?
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
Supposedly we're going to get a lot of like Legends type of Easter eggs and things like that. And of course, they love Easter eggs. And like you said, we do have kind of the guardrails on from Favreau and Filoni, but they've been given a lot of flexibility to be able to do some of this stuff. So are there any Easter eggs you think we're going to get that are going to be kind of more of a big deal, or something that we'll want to go back and explore later on? I mean, there's a lot of discussion around the T&Es, I think, because we've seen some hints here and there. And this goes back to like one of the Han Solo books, and and some potential options there about the treasure or anything like that. But are there things there that you're starting to kind of hone in on that you think are likely to happen, that you're hoping will happen, or something like, without getting on the wild, reckless speculation bandwagon, but more of like something that might happen that we might pull back from some of that old material?
Well, I don't have anything that's not reckless as far as speculation goes. I mean, that's what
it would be irresponsible for you to not be reckless. So.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to Ad-Aten, which, by the way, the name of that planet is, you say it and it's like, oh, it's an AT-AT or an AT-AT, right? They've got to have done that purposely, right? But there's something about that. Yeah. But yeah, there's something about the planet itself, like and that's where I think a lot of the most of my notes as far as speculation come from. In that they did mention at some point, I forget which interview it was, they talked about that planet being, quote, the crown jewel of the old Republic. And that got me crazy excited, because I started thinking about this. Okay, yeah, on the surface, it probably is just a reference. But, we know, not officially, that we have a good feeling that at some point the old Republic will come out, right? This started about 2-3 years ago, maybe even longer, depending on when you started tracking this. But we've been projecting that the old Republic is going to surface at some point. It's on the roadmap. I just don't know where. They're waiting for timing, whatever the case may be. But this could be an opportunity to start weaving in some of those references from Legends in the old Republic. And not saying it's going to be heavy-handed, but there might be some things in here. And I think it starts with this planet. And I guess let's just get into predictions at this point, and we can maybe start with this one. And we can talk. I want to talk about the planet itself and get your thoughts on kind of why the cameras, why the droids, what's the secrecy, if there is secrecy there. But when I hear that is the crown jewel of the old Republic, I think that might tie into something that maybe this planet isn't what it seems, right? Maybe this planet was renamed. Maybe it's a Korriban or something, from Legends, right? That they've kind of not really talked about as far as canon goes, right? In canon now, it's what was the name of the planet now? I just drew a blank. But weaving in stuff like that from Legends, right? Weaving in from the old Republic might be a way to really kind of set that up. And maybe they go back further. Maybe they set up things for like Dawn of the Jedi, that sort of thing. But we know that this ship, the Onyx Cinder, crashed there at some point. Well, I don't know for sure it's been crashed, but it's there. It's a ship that was used during the old Republic. You've got a planet here, which is called the crown jewel of the old Republic. When I hear that, I think it's a Coruscant type planet. And at least in Legends, Coruscant was still around, right? That was still kind of the main Republic planet at the time. So I don't think it's that. It could be another Republic planet. Maybe it could be a Sith planet. Maybe it's just they're using that, saying it's the crown jewel of the old Republic, when really there's something maybe more nefarious that was happening during that time. So I think the Easter eggs will come in waves for some of that. And we'll probably get more towards the end of the series that kind of allude to what we should expect going forward with the Mandoverse. Whether it's the movie, I know there's been recent reports here just in the last 2 weeks that there's another movie that they're talking about releasing that's not been named officially. And so maybe it's going to tie into that, but I don't know that we're going to get really anything of significance. I don't think, if anything, it'll probably be MacGuffins that we have and nice nods and that sort of thing. But I don't think we're getting anything too concrete, at least early on.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is that apparently when the kids are trying to get back home, no one has heard of their planet.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other part that's interesting, right? Why is it secreted away? Why is it usually when you talk to anybody in Star Wars, like any of these characters, they all have an idea of these planets, right? And they look them up, they can find them except for Camino, right? So what makes this planet so unique and special, right? What is going on in this testing environment or whatever they're doing in this? It almost feels like the Truman Show to an extent, right? Everything's just
I have that in my notes, by the way. I literally has Truman Show in here. Yep.
Yeah, everything's just too perfect, right? Everything's just too manicured and too right where it needs to be, and everything goes along as it's exactly supposed to and scripted to do. Why is that, right? And so it's a question, right? And then when you find this ship and it's got Old Republic relics in there, maybe a treasure or something, there's a big story behind all of that stuff. And like, what is special about this planet? And this whole crown jewel idea, the crown jewel wouldn't have disappeared in this way, right? It would have had to die and then kind of been resurrected. So what's the story? Are we actually going to get that story, with that? And we do see some kind of Tianese language on Fern's jacket. So this might be Tyon or something kind of tying back to that era, which again is very much rooted in the Old Republic,
right?
Which would be really cool to start bridging some of that in, even if it's just name dropping at this point and not a lot of deep dives behind all of that, but something to start to bridge us into that world to be able to open us up that, hey, this really is going to happen at some point. We're just kind of teasing you a little bit with it. I think that would be a lot of fun to be able to start doing.
Yeah. I mean, and to that point, like the planet itself, to kind of further tease this out, it does look like it's perfect. And if you have similar to like the Truman Show, and I was trying to think of other instances where they've done this. I know there are other stuff out there and I just nothing really came to mind, but there's a reason why it looks like that. And I started to wonder too, do people leave this planet, right? Have they made it so perfect that you never have to leave? And by that in itself kind of begs the question, well, why would someone do that, right? Who's behind it? Why would they have created this planet that is so perfect that no one ever wants to leave? And I think that there's some material there, because when you look at we talked about this, I think it was this might've been the Patreon breakdown we did. We got the sense that the parents were being very secretive about going after their kids, right? Their kids are lost. They take off on a ship and they don't go like to the Republic, the New Republic, and be like, hey, our kids are missing. Can, send out the search warrants or go find, the search crew or whatever, search party. And none of that seems to happen, at least from what we got. I mean, there's some X-Wings that we see a little bit later, and maybe that's after stuff is developed and they finally realize, okay, we need to go after these kids, right, for the right reasons. But at least initially, it is all very hush hush. It is all very secret, right? I think there's one scene that was in that Patreon trailer where Wynn's dad was kind of like looking over. He was trying to get information on maybe what they were doing or where they may have gone. And the robots were kind of monitoring. They were almost like sentinels, making sure that they're not doing anything. And so why would people be forced to stay on that planet? Now, if there's something about the planet itself that's special, maybe it's a nexus of sorts, like a force nexus. Maybe again, there's, I don't know, a Jedi temple, a Sith temple, ancient artifacts. I don't know, maybe Palpatine was behind some of this at some point. Maybe they're the ones that were behind. Now I'm getting into the wild and reckless speculation, right? But, maybe that was, a way to keep people from not only going there, but ever leaving. There's no reason to leave. And so that's why it does look as pristine as it does, why it looks so perfect and so unusual than anything else we've seen in Star Wars. And this goes back to that question you asked earlier. Like, yeah, I get it why people are being turned off by school buses and suburbia America and all the aesthetics that we see there that we relate to Amblin. But I think there is a purpose. I think someone has intentionally done all of that. And that's why it feels so odd and so weird. And then when these kids leave, it is really an absolute, even though they may not be going to an entirely new galaxy, which I know people have speculated that that's the case. They're in their own, just being in their own galaxy and knowing what little they know is probably eye-opening and an adventure in itself, because they've just never thought that they would ever do that or had to do that. So I don't know. I know there's some reckless stuff in there, but you could even go further. You could say, what if this is like a portal of like to Mortis or some other crazy thing, and that ties back to like Sabine and Ahsoka, and that's how they eventually get back, if they want to kind of bridge those two together. Maybe there's Thrawn behind this. I've seen some folks talking about the outbound flight and that lost colony that was settled later down the road, right? Maybe they're part of that. Maybe we're so far on the outskirts of the galaxy that this was that colony that survived after outbound flight. And Palpatine again would have to be behind something like that. So I know I'm throwing all kinds of stuff out there, but this planet has got me so intrigued, and I've been sitting here thinking about all these crazy theories. And there's Alex chiming in, tinfoil hat theory time. Yeah, I'm already there. So I don't know, Jonesy, what, or he's reaching for the hat, but you have anything that you want to add, I guess, anything else that kind of piqued your interest or you thought about as far as the planet?
I usually throw cold water all over everything. So I'll just remind
Please
everyone.
do so, because I'm going to keep going here.
Well, I think the thing is we have to remember, so I think it's pretty much been debunked that there's no galaxial transportation going on here. This is all within the Star Wars galaxy.
Which I subscribe to, yeah.
Yeah, I think they've even adjusted some of the text, like in the Star Wars galaxy or in their galaxy, in this galaxy or whatever. So I think there's some of that that's already been shown there. I think also we have to remember, conceptually, we tend to make things much bigger. They usually tend to be somewhat simple, right? I think this show might be an example of kind of a more simplistic perspective and point of view and direction than we're maybe even used to in some of the other content as well, which, I mean, with Peridia and some of that, they were kind of laying those hints down, but it was still relatively straightforward. This one might be a bit more of a kind of a typical construct, again, within the Amblin idea, full of wonder and adventure, but still relatively simple in nature, right? Because it's kind of through the eyes of kids. And while kids are involved, it's still kind of an adult type of adventure, but it's still, generally through the kids, and kids seeing things in kind of, black and white terms, right? Right and wrong and things like that. So I think some of that will continue to get to that. I love some of the ideas, though. I mean, we always want these things to be special and unique, and there's something be kind of underneath it all that has some sort of relevance. I'm okay with it not being all around Palpatine, like it kind of not tying to him at all. But I think that's the bigger question, right? Is how does this all tie into Mandalorian or Ahsoka or anything else beyond just the pirate aspect of things, which we know Vane will be there, right? So that's one aspect of it. But does it play into that narrative at all, or even should it, right? Or can it just be tangentially happen? We don't know specifically where this falls in the timeline, though, either. We know it's during the Mandoverse timeline, maybe around season 3 of The Mandalorian, but I don't know if Ahsoka has happened yet. We don't really quite know where they all typically fit in really nice and neat yet. So, where does it go? Are we going to get some of that context? But I'm assuming this will happen after season 3, after Vane has left Gorian Shard rather than before. But even that's not a guarantee. We don't have that specific yet. So a lot of question marks about how this is going to work. But I love the idea of going on an adventure. I love tying it back to the Old Republic. I love the potential ideas of bringing in old Legends material, I don't even know if you can call like Han Solo. What was the book?
Star's End?
No, it wasn't Star's End. Was it like Solo Command? Is that what it was called? No, that was Raid Squadron. Anyway, there was another Han Solo book, one of the really, really early ones where like
the Brian Daly ones?
I think so, yeah. I think it was.
Okay.
Well, I get it. It's been a long time. But anyway, like I love the idea of bringing some of that in, though, and making that content relevant again and making it fresh and refreshing it, and then bringing those concepts to us, because I think there were some cool ideas, like the idea of a crystal skull, and we see clearly a big skull there in the treasure room. It looks like it's not crystal, but it could be something that's linked to Solo, a Star Wars story, or it could just be Goonies, right? It could be a number of things that they can sprinkle things in. I think that would be a lot of fun to be able to do a lot of that. So I like being able to do all that. I don't really have a lot of speculation because I want to go into this more of an open mind and not start making my mind up where it's going to going. Acolyte was a little bit hard to do that because we had some expectations that start to be developed. But with this show, quite honestly, I don't really have a lot of expectations because they've not set me on a path to have any, I think, first of all, which, good or bad, it's there, right? So I think on the good side, you don't have anything. You just kind of open mind. The bad side is does it get you excited enough to go watch the show? So I think that's maybe the rub there. But when you get to like things like your what was it called, the Razor Crest moment, like I have like no idea. I have a feeling it's gonna be things like a character coming in and linking it to something else or something like that. It better be Hondo. That's the only thing I'm gonna say for a Razor Crest moment is it better be Hondo or I'm out.
Okay. Well,
you've already disappointed me once with Hondo this
I know.
week.
Well, and I got you excited though with Hondo because at that trailer, right? I mentioned that they show those kids walking in, and that whatever that thing was back there looked like Hondo Anaka. But
Right.
I got a couple. So let's get into these are more predictions and these are more series questions type things and I just kind of want your thoughts and you can shoot them down. And if you do, then I'll be super excited and go all overboard so we can both say that we got something right here. Well, first off, I got a personal question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot. Have you seen the Goonies yet?
No.
Are you planning to watch the Goonies before this series?
Considering this series comes out on Tuesday, no.
Okay. That'll be a very interesting perspective. I cannot wait to hear what you think.
I've seen parts of the Goonies. So just
I know,
to be
I
clear,
know.
I've seen parts of it. I've just not seen it all the way through.
Okay. I'm just fascinated by that still. So I don't know what I do. I guess strap you down and like make you watch that. But so Jod, the character of Jod, a lot of discussion around whether or not he's force sensitive. Is he a Jedi? What's your take on him?
No, not a Jedi. Force sensitive, of course. We've seen that. So assuming those aren't parlor tricks like Obi-Wan Kenobi, that I'm assuming he's just force sensitive and is just out there kind of making his own way and kind of doing it for his own good to that point. He knows he has a gift. He kind of keeps it on the down low, but no formal training or anything like that. Yeah,
and I'm with you. I think he is not. I don't think he's a Jedi. They did a great job, at least in the footage that we've seen so far, to kind of really keep you guessing. But I can't remember where he's asking for someone's trust, and he's like, "Of course." After he says, "You are a Jedi," right? He's like, "Of course," and you can tell. You're like, "Okay, you don't believe him." Right. I don't think he is a Jedi. I think he might be force sensitive. And there are other people that are force sensitive that really have never had any training. Honestly, they might it could be parlor tricks, like you said. I think that might cheapen it a little too much if it just turns out to be a bunch of cheap tricks. So I would like to think that he's at least force sensitive. I think there might still be some kind of connection to Jedi loosely in a way. Maybe it's a father, maybe it's a character he's after, maybe it's some backstory there where he's got a connection to Jedi, but I don't think he's a Jedi himself. I do suspect, though, that we will get a double cross from him because just the way he's talked about his character, even from the onset of the interviews that he's done and some of the stuff that we've seen now in the trailers, I have a feeling when there's going to be a decision point when he's going to have to make a choice between the kids or whatever his own selfish goals or whatever he's trying to do. And I do feel like that'll happen, but I think he'll come back around. So almost like a double cross, right? Where he turns his back and then the moral compass kicks in. I can't do that to the kids. And then he comes back and saves them, and turns into this kind of character with a heart of
solo
gold
moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I suspect that will probably happen as well with him. I threw out something back in July. Do you remember when we decoded the patch that Fern was wearing, and it had the letters DAK? And I said, maybe this is Dak's daughter, which I think timing wise, it all works. I mean, you can't disprove that wouldn't be the case. I think we've learned more about her character and that her mom is kind of like in the government of sorts. And I suspect that's on the planet itself. That seems far-fetched. I would like to say that this was actually picked up by Screen Rant. They took my tweet and made a whole article about it, about whether or not there was any, substance behind it. It probably doesn't feel as substantial now, and I don't think it is. But any thoughts anymore around whether we get Dak's daughter? Is that as Dak Ralter, for anybody who doesn't remember, that is the co-pilot for Luke Skywalker on Hoth.
No, I mean, her mom is clearly the one that's on the planet. She's the principal or the proctor or whatever it was. I forgot the specific name of it that they had there, but. So, for the government though, I mean, it feels like this is it feels more like a school than a government facility, but I think that goes back to what's going on here and how does that play into it? But Fern's definitely got this rogue spirit to her, right? And maybe it's just because her mom is the headmaster type of person and she feels like she can get away with stuff and she's got kind of this badass attitude. I don't really know, but there's clearly something kind of driving this general spirit of adventure and jumping feet first into these things without necessarily thinking too much about them.
Yeah. What about, you mentioned it earlier, Hondo. Like, I know you said you want him to show up. Do you think that's really going to be the case? Do you think it's possible that we do get Hondo show up?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think we had speculated this before. You have a show that's heavily centered around pirates. Why not Hondo? I mean, and how can you not have Hondo type of thing? Because he's just the pirate. Mm-hmm. And I think inherently that's the problem, right? Is Hondo is such a presence on the screen anytime we've had him. and he's just you just fall in love with him every single time with the characterization of it, the mannerisms, the voice is amazing, of course, and I think it just doesn't really work when he's not the center of attention, and he can play kind of bit parts to it, but I think if you're going to show him, you would want to feature him in some way, and I think that's the fun part, and it's also kind of fun to have him working with a Jedi because then he can lean on all the stuff with Ezra and everybody else too. But so I think I joke that if I don't see him, then we're done. But it's true. But the likelihood is really, really low that I think he'll show up. But if there was ever an opportunity for us to bring him into this timeline, it feels like this would be it, though.
I think we're long overdue. I think, like to your point just now, this is the perfect vessel, no pun intended, to bring Hondo to the live screen. I think he's going to show up. I don't think it's that far fetched.
I would have loved to him be the nemesis rather than Vane, because Hondo can still play the villain and the good guy, and still kind of do that. But then you have Jude Law's character, right? So you have Jod. So does that confuse it? And Vane makes more sense because he's just purely a bad guy, right? And he's got this bad group of people. Sorry to interrupt, but I think maybe that's why Hondo no longer works in this series, I guess.
I'm for it. I think he's going to show up. There's just something about it. I think the timing is right, like I said. And, again, how he fits in, I don't know, because he's got so many connections, and there's a lot of different ways you could honestly work him in depending on where the show goes. But yeah, it just seems too primed for that. And it's Dave Filoni. Why wouldn't he want to bring one of his most beloved characters on screen? He's brought everybody else at this point. So, at some point, maybe Ford was talking about, hey, we need a pirate. And he's like, I got the guy. I know exactly who you need to bring in to fill this role that you got here.
Vane.
No, not that guy.
Jaleel White.
Well, and so Gunter, which I don't know much about, but so this show does have kind of like a treasure hunter aspect. Mm-hmm. Do we get an Afra? Do we get a Fee from the Bad Batch? She was a treasure hunter. We've seen her on screen. She's in a Dave Filoni character.
Probably not. Again, I think, unfortunately, this is a common theme for us when we talk about these shows, like 8 episodes, 30, 35 minutes per episode, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not a lot of time. Need to focus on the kids. There's another story going on. And then you got the Jude Law's character of like, what is he? Is he good? Is he bad? How's it going to work? I struggle to see that they'd have the time to be able to do and explore that and kind of tell you who they are for them to be meaningful to work in. I think that's usually the thing I keep running into is, how do you do that in a meaningful way? Because if you're going to bring them in, you have to bring them at least for 1 episode, maybe 2. And does that detract from it? What are they adding to it that you can't do with the characters you already have when you got an ensemble of 5 people plus the droid now, so 6, on these adventures, and then you've got other pirates and all of the misadventures that they have. Not saying it's not possible. You could definitely do it, and you could do cameos in that kind of way. Clearly, that all stuff works, but to do some of this stuff in a more meaningful way, which some of these characters I think are revered and kind of deserve a little bit of that, if we're honest, or at least my personal opinion. I think that would be more ideal than just having them kind of show up on the screen. Hey, kid, here, let me show you how to do this. Like, just like I taught, the Bad Batch or Omega or whatever. They're like, who the hell's Omega? So some of it just doesn't work super well, even if we would be able to make the connections to it. But, Plagueis showed up in Acolyte, and all you saw was his creepy fingers in his face. So, it doesn't take much to be able to work these characters in. So don't overthink it sometimes too, right? What about you?
Yeah, I think Omega will be in there. I think Fee's going to be in there. I think, no, I'm kidding. Yep. I want to go to
Hunter. Yep.
Hunter as well. Yep. Rob says, even if Hondo is in a jail cell with the main cast for an episode and helps him get out, that would be cool.
I like Rob. He's my favorite.
There's just so many different ways you could work him in. Like I said, whether he doesn't have to be a main character. And I don't even know, he's one of those characters, honestly, that you don't have to give the background on, because he's already got so much background in Star Wars Rebels.
We've never gotten background for him. So
well, I just meant works, like right? He's in other stuff, right? He's already he's an established character. Hell, we got him at a ride sitting there talking to audiences. So that in itself is already a presence where people are like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. He was talking to me when I was waiting in line over at, Star Wars World. What about Mando? Do you think there's any, this one feels like it has to tie in somehow. And I don't know how. It's probably going to be at the very end if it does. But we know that this does link to a larger narrative story that's being told. I would suspect that Mando has to be a part of that. I'm not saying he's going to show up. Maybe he does. maybe it's characters from that series, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think we get, something explicit about as a tie-in, maybe even Mando himself?
Man, this is where it's crazy. So when we've watched some of the interviews, they had talked about they pitched the show, and then they're like, you know what, we've got this Mando verse, our words not theirs, right? That this could fit into. We could just fit it in here. Does it fit there and actually connect with the story, or was it was just convenient to set it there and to leave it there in this period of the galaxy? I think that's the question we have on our minds. If it's there just because it kind of worked and it fit okay, that's one thing. But if it was meant to fit there and then also feed part of the overall Mandalorian narrative of where the whole story, the overall overarching story is going, then I think you're right. I think we have to have something that tangentially connects us to it. And who better to show up than Din Djarin himself? Or, I mean, because Grief Karga is not going to be there, of course, unfortunately, because Carl Weathers is passing. But
Sure.
You could have other ways of doing it. We've seen X-Wings, so you could connect it in those types of ways, right? With Carson, Teva, and others. That seems to be a little overused at this point, but those would potentially make sense. And again, if there's something weird going on this planet, and that's a great way to connect these things, right? They kind of connect with these kids, if they see them, and then comes back to this planet, and that's how it all kind of comes together at the very end, right?
Right.
And we get some sort of connection. But why would Mando just show up? I think is the other question, but that's also probably the more exciting question, right? Of what does this actually mean? Like, what are we doing? We got to wait till 2026 and all that kind of stuff. So I think, when you talk about I don't know if that's considered like a Razor Crest type of moment, but I think like, who do you think shows up that's meaningful, that connects it to the broader story and the broader narrative? I mean, that's kind of your main one. It can't be Ahsoka or it can't be Sabine. It doesn't really make sense for it to be Thrawn necessarily. Maybe as a name drop or something, it feels like something's going on in Dathomir or whatever. It could be one thing, but from a tangible person, your most likely subject is going to be Mandalorian Grogu.
Yeah. No, I co-sign all that. I want to kind of wrap this up here. One of the other questions that we tend to ask is, does anybody die, right? The Death Watch portion of this. And this one feels very difficult to kind of target and say that anyone would die, because we've got kids as the main characters. Jude Law's characters, of course, there. I mean, if anybody's going to die, it's probably going to be an adult. Maybe it would be him, but I just don't see this kind of being something that the series needs, right? We don't have Sith and...
Yeah, maybe the droid. I mean, bad guys, but yeah.
SM-33.
Of the heroes, I mean, the droid's like the only candidate I think I would throw out there. I'm with you. I think there's basically zero chance of... I mean, none of the kids are going to die. And I don't think Jod Nawood dies either.
Yeah, Music Train says they killed the kid in the Acolyte. Well,
they killed all the kids in the Acolyte.
Yeah, there's a lot of death in that one. It just doesn't. I mean, that a series about Sith. Okay, yeah, people are going to die. This one, don't think that's really going to go that direction. Maybe it's a bad guy, of course, all that, but I don't see any of the main characters. I think they all lived through this series. All right. Let's see what else. Okay. Last question maybe, and then we'll kind of get into final thoughts. Razor Crest moment. I know you mentioned Hondo. Any other thoughts? Anything else there?
No, you go ahead. You've been eerily quiet on this subject so far. So I've been trying to tease it out of you because it's got to be something there, but this is a hard one for this show.
That's exactly that's where I'm at.
It's hard for every show actually, but this one in particular.
Yeah. And that's the point of the question, right? It's supposed to be something just so far out there, and it doesn't have to be significant or consequential. I would dug deep in this one, man. I'm looking for a Cade Genty reference, and that is a comic book character that, because, we saw them read, here's my logic and how I got here. Something that was so important to me growing up in the 80s were comic books. And it was only until we got Cade Genty as a character later on in the Poe Dameron, I think comics, or I think of Swords, or maybe it was the book, I forget now, where he was talking about it. I think Finn later on in one of the books that they had come out with as well mentioned this character, but he's the only known comic book character. And I think about okay, we're going back to the 80s. We've got kids on bikes or doing the whole Amblin thing. I'd love to see one of them actually have I'll even call it a physical comic book, just kind of wrapped in the back of their pocket. With Cade Genty, who was like this master of Section 9. It was a big hero, and there's a TV series and stuff. I know that's not really, again, a consequential thing, but I really hope that we get something so far-fetched and so deep as far as something like that, because that could be potentially a character that, maybe shows up during the Old Republic series or goes even further back, because we don't have any kind of perspective on how far back that character really went. It would be nice to see, you know, if they really are tied up in the lore of stuff, that we get something like a High Republic character that's name dropped. Again, doesn't have to go deep. They don't have to go deep into it, but just tying these two worlds together and tying these two timelines together would be kind of nice and surprising for a lot of folks that are really embedded in kind of that, the trivia of Star Wars and some of those deeper cuts. But beyond that, I don't really have anything. I mean, again, the series has done a really good job, like through the promotions, of just keeping it very tight knit and not really giving us a whole lot of information outside of what we know and have already seen. So it's really difficult to kind of make those types of predictions. I think as the series goes on, we'll probably get a better feel and we'll be able to tease out some things of like where it potentially could go. But at least going into this one, it's been very difficult and very challenging.
Yeah, I think if it's not a cameo, I mean, you could even throw like maybe a Luke Skywalker finding Jod's character or something. You could throw something like out there. I think the more likely one is going to be something about the planet. I'm with you. I think it's going to be something about this place and some connection back. And maybe there's something with the treasure too that's maybe it just really blows our minds or something to that effect. But I think it's going to be one of these you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper in. It's going to be more of a nerd thing than maybe just the explosive nature of the Razor Crest moment, like the original part of it, or just something surprising you don't expect to happen. But it's, you know, impactful to your characters. But this one, like, I think I'm with you though. It might be more of like our own little inner Razor Crest moment of something of interest level rather than something shocking on the series. But there's got to be something that kind of shakes that up just a little bit. There's usually something in all of these that points us in that direction, like the allusion to, or the moving towards Mortis at the end of Ahsoka, right? Now, not just the Anakin moments, of course, we kind of expected that, but going to Mortis and actually seeing the father and things like that were maybe somewhat expected, but to actually get it was like, wow, that was really cool. But it's really difficult to figure out what this is going to be for the series because we just don't.
Yeah.
We don't really know where it's going, right? And what treasure would they find? But something with either treasure or or this planet, I guess is going to be my general guess. Rob in the chat has Jackson. That actually did pop in my mind as well. Jackson, of course, the rabbit that Kevin Scott loves so much from the comic books as well. So that would be something. Cool. He could very well be there, though. That's another one of those cameo moments that are entirely plausible these days.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. I guess your final thoughts. What's your hype meter at? Like, how excited are you for the series, and what are you looking to forward to the most?
Hype meter is still relatively tempered. I think at this point, out of 10, it would probably be maybe like a 6, something like that, maybe 6.5. It's perked up a little bit. When I first kind of got into some of this, it was actually quite low. But I've enjoyed watching the interviews. I think this has been interesting, kind of ramp up the way they've done it. It's been very short, which has been very weird. But then again, it seems to be working with the holiday. So yeah, so overall, I'm getting there, but we'll see. I think how well will this perform? I think it's going to be one of those shows. If it does really well these first couple of episodes and maybe the following week, I could see where this show is maybe not a huge numbers maker, but is one that has legs and continues to go on and pulls solid numbers for a number of weeks over multiple episodes throughout the holidays. And I think that's maybe what Disney is kind of looking for. They know they've got something a little bit different here. It's not typical. It's not the lightsabers, not the big blasters and things like that of the characters and the Jedi and everything that we know, the Mandalorians. So it's a little bit different narrative here, but I think this is something that if word of mouth is good on this series, I think it could have a lot of longevity that I think would really do well for the Star Wars franchise as well and kind of help us not reset, but kind of reground a little bit of something that we can all kind of feel good about and enjoy and kind of go on an adventure. I think as long as we kind of keep it within that spirit of mind, and that's kind of where I'm going into this, is that I'm ready for kind of a Star Wars adventure. I've been a huge proponent for like the Calrissian Chronicles, right? Just more of serial type of storytelling like we had with Indiana Jones, that type of thing. I think this is something that's venturing a little bit closer to that. And so I'm excited to see where that goes and to see if we can nail that here. And especially with a young ensemble cast, this is going to be interesting to see how well they do this.
Yeah. This one's difficult. Like I mean, if you know anything about me, aside from Star Wars, the other thing that I'm really passionate about is 80s pop culture. I mean, I did an entire podcast for like 2.5 years and countless hours talking about 80s podcasts or talking about 80s pop culture.
That was just 2 chapters in the book too.
Yeah. It is an absolute huge passion of mine, and I won't get into that right now. So it's difficult for me not to get hyped for this because of what I know about the creators and what they've said already. It kind of fits into what I'm looking forward to the most. Like I want to see those homages, and I don't think they're going to be on the nose. I don't think there's going to be anything. I mean, there's been a couple things already that you can even see. We talked about the water slide, right? That scene where somebody's kind of going down a tunnel. I mean, it looks like it was lifted right out of the Goonies when they find One-Eyed Willie's ship at the very end. But I do expect us to see more things like that from, the Stand By Me's and the Flight of the Navigator. And, there's tons and tons of movies. In fact, I think I'm going to post something about a lot of the movies that I remember watching in the 80s that feel kind of in the same vein very soon here. But I'm looking forward to all of that. And it's hard not to get super hyped for this show, even though like I said earlier, I kind of went into this with low expectations initially. Now that I know more about it and I know, from what I've seen, it's difficult not to say that my hype meter isn't like at a 9. I could be very disappointed, and that's okay. I tend to get really excited about stuff, and if it doesn't turn out my way, it's fine. I don't lose sleep over it. I don't get upset about it. I enjoy the ride. And right now, I think what's really fueled me is just the fandom. There is something about this series that for many of the reasons that we've already talked about, where everybody feels like this is kind of a palate cleanser of sorts. You've got people on both sides of the fandom coming into this, and this is very different than like any of the other series. Andor was not like this. The Acolyte sure as hell was not like this. Mando was probably the closest thing. Season 1, maybe season 2 was the closest thing that we've had to this, where you've got sects of the fandom that typically are polar opposites of what they enjoy and what they're looking forward to in Star Wars. This one does seem to have everybody at least like interested and talking positively. And I know Vlad chimed in earlier. I didn't get a chance to get to your feedback, Vlad, but we talked about that earlier on the episode. So rewind the episode and go back where we covered this. I know there are a lot of people that are looking at this, or some people that are looking at this and saying, look, that doesn't look like Star Wars. We've already talked about why that is the case, and I don't think that's going to be the entire thing. When you put that part aside, everything else that we've gotten, everything else aesthetically, the cinematography, the acting, the script, the exploration, all of the other aspects absolutely feel like they're set in Star Wars. And so I think it's grounding. I think that's what people are latching into. But again, from all these different areas of fandom, they're looking at this and going, hey, this does look like Star Wars. It feels like Star Wars, even though we're going to be on this journey with a bunch of kids. And that kind of spirit that's going around right now has really fueled at least my excitement for this series, and certainly set the expectations high, even if they may not be met, by the time we get to, episode 4 or 5 or whatever. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, it's hard not to get excited because this is Star Wars and you've got something set for me again in the 80s. I don't know what more they could have done here to get me excited. So yeah, I'm pretty high on this one right now.
Let me ask you a question. Will they call SM-33 SME?
No,
Smee.
I don't think they will. I like the acronym name. I like that they use that in there, but no, I don't think they're going to do that. So,
is that your cat?
I don't know.
I heard this like, rawr.
It might have been. I've got 5 cats. So it might have been Sabine and Ezra out there fighting or something or whatever. So, apologies for that if that came through. I didn't hear it. So. Maybe we'll edit that out. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll make that a soundbite going forward and use it in shows if it was really good. So, all right, let's kind of wrap this up. Any other final thoughts? Anything else you want to say, or do you want to just say thank you to some fine folks that joined us for the live stream tonight?
Yeah, let's do that. So thanks to everyone who came on the live stream. cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to this, thanks for the download. You can join us like all of these amazing people: JJ Skywalker, My Star Wars Guys, Diego David, Alex, Music Train, Vader's Girl, Rebel Scum, Stephanie, Trent, One versus CPU, Vlad, Hard Countered. Thank you all so much for all the folks in the background. We hope you'll come by and say hello next time. Leave us a comment what you're most excited about in the show. What aspect are you looking forward to the most? And if you don't mind, hit the little thumbs up too. We appreciate the social engagement.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for us here. We'll be back in just a few days, honestly. So we're going to be covering these shows, I think on, what do we say? Wednesday night? I've already forgotten what we talked about.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday nights. So we'll break these down on Wednesday nights. Even the premiere, we got episodes 1 and 2 again coming that Monday. That was a day earlier than everything else. Everything else will be coming out on Tuesdays. So that next day on Wednesday, we'll come back and break down every one of these episodes going forward, so you guys can see us then. So if you haven't already liked, subscribed, and done all this stuff for YouTube, please do so you don't miss our breakdowns. They're a lot of fun. They're very extensive, and we leave no proverbial stone unturned. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all here for the premiere in just a few days.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.